issue, then it will be very problematic. Meeting is being streamed.
Streaming live on YouTube. Please share the YouTube link also.
But oh, the Miss Shah has joined us already. Yes, Fatma, you can start.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, good
Oishi,
evening.
you're audible, ma.
Good evening.
Okay. So I shall start with today's proceedings. Very good afternoon, Oishi. A very good afternoon to our esteemed guest, Miss Oishi Shaha, my dear students and colleagues. I would also like to welcome Coordinator, Ma'am Miss A.N. Basu, and our senior faculty member, Miss S. Roy. This afternoon, we have all assembled here for the legal studies job shadowing. Job shadowing is a very crucial tool for experiential learning. Experiential learning, also known as EXL, is the process of learning through experience and is more specifically defined as learning through reflection on doing. MBIVA as an institution has always believed in providing the best opportunities to its students. It is keeping in mind the same that we have initiated the practice of job shadowing. It's been 4 years that we had initiated it, and we have successfully sustained it to inculcate professional excellence in our students. In the previous years, our students have successfully done job shadowing at the law chambers of the best lawyers in the city and in the finest of the law firms. As a part of the job shadowing, they have also attended Lok Adalats in the city courts. They have also been taken to the Calcutta High Court in order to witness the proceedings of the court firsthand. Since the past 2 years, we have initiated the concept of in house job shadowing, wherein professional experts are invited at our institution where they provide a detailed insight into their profession. The year 2020 being an exceptional year, the job shadowing too is an exceptional one, wherein first time in the history of MBIVA, we are having a virtual job shadowing. Without taking any more time, I would like to introduce our guest for today's job shadowing, Ms. Oishi Shaha. Ms. Oishi Shaha has obtained her master's in law from the University of Cambridge, specializing in public international law. She has completed her BLLB honors from the West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences. Her broad areas of interest are international humanitarian law, human rights law, and decolonization of international law, which she hopes to pursue through research and teaching. So, Oishi, you have been there and you have done it. Now we want to hear it from you. So, we would first like you to give a brief introduction about yourself and how and why you chose the legal profession. Over
Right.
to you, Oishi.
Right. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and good evening. Thank you so much, Fatma ma'am, for inviting me for this talk. I'm truly honored to be here with all of you and share the little experience that I've had so far in this field with all of you, and I hope that it can be of some help to you all. So, my name is Oishi. I graduated from the West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences in 2018, and then I went on to the University of Cambridge in 2018 and started pursuing my master's in law. And I specialized in public international law. And I graduated in 2019 last year. And then I took up a position at the OP Jindal Global University Faculty of Law. And currently, I teach and I'm lecturing in law. So, over the last 3 semesters that I've been at Jindal Global Law School, I have taught, first of all, rural governance, then I've taught comparative constitutional law, where I was co-teaching with Professor N.P. Singh, and this term I'm teaching first-year law students legal methods. Um, Apart from that, I also research and I work with two separate research think tanks within Jindal Global Law School. So one of them is the Center for Health Law, Ethics and Technology, where we focus on advocacy on sex, gender, sexuality, law and marginalization, and basically all intersectionalities of law and marginalization. And I also work at the Center for Human Rights Studies at OP Jindal Global University. So that's a little bit about myself. So like many of you all, I started prepping for CLAT in the 12th grade when I was in class 12, and I come from a family of lawyers. So it was a very natural kind of a choice for me to go into law. My father, my uncle, my brothers, my cousins, everyone in my family, with the exception of probably my mother, is in the field of law. So it was a very natural choice for me. And we joke about the fact that in our family, we've stopped thinking of other career options and other career paths because by default, all of us tend to go into law. So I attempted CLAT for the first time in 2012. And I was, of course, like most of you all are right now, trying to balance it with boards. And I did fairly decently in boards, but CLAT didn't go as per plan. And I got HNLU Raipur. And I wasn't very happy with the fact that I got Raipur and I didn't want to go to Raipur. And at the same time, I happened to get into Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi University. So I decided to go to LSR and study history instead of studying law. And I felt quite pleased with my choice because I was doing something different. I was breaking away from this kind of path that everyone in my family takes and studies and pursues law. And all of my friends, my closest friends from high school, also happened to go to LSR and Stephens. So it was a great time, and it seemed like the perfect option for me at that point in time in 2012. And I moved to Delhi and I started studying history at LSR. And I loved history. I absolutely loved history in school. It was one of my favorite subjects. And the teachers that I had for history in school were so exceptional that they made the subject absolutely like come alive for me. But when I started studying history in college, I was highly disillusioned by the kind of curriculum, by the teaching methodology, by the way the course was conducted in LSR. And LSR just didn't seem to be the place for me. I was very happy with my life outside of college, with all of the extracurriculars I pursued, with the fact that I lived with my best friends and I lived in a different city. I was exploring life away from home for the first time. But I was very dissatisfied and disillusioned by the teaching in the classroom. And I just felt like it wasn't stimulating enough and that I could do better and I needed to be challenged. And my brother was also in university at that point in time. And funnily enough, he was at Jindal Global Law School, where I now teach. So my brother convinced me to give CLAT a second shot. And I started studying for CLAT while I was in Delhi University at LSR studying history. So I gave CLAT 2 times. And in my second attempt at CLAT, I happened to, much to my surprise, get through NUJS. And that's when I switched from DU and I came back to Calcutta and I took up my place at NUJS in 2013. And that's hands down one of the best decisions I could have ever made in my life. So NUJS was a huge learning experience, not just in the classroom, but because of the kind of peer groups I had, because of the kind of opportunities it offered me, because of the exposure it gave me, and very honestly, more than the learning in the classroom, it was the kind of extracurriculars, the kind of people I met, the opportunities and the skills that I picked up in NUJS that really helped me shape my areas of interest. So right from my first day rather in the law school, I was very inclined towards legal aid. And the Legal Aid Society at NUJS is something that has really shaped my career interests. And I was a part of the Legal Aid Society right from the first year till my fifth year in law school. And I was I was really happy at NUJS. I learned a lot. I unlearned a lot. I met people from all across the country. I made some of my closest friends. I got opportunities to moot, to debate, to write, to part in colloquiums, to publish my research papers, to present them, everything that I could have expected. And then when I was in my fifth year, there was this kind of conflict that I was faced with about what I want to do next, whether I want to work at a law firm, whether I want to go into practice, whether I want to study further. And it seemed like for me, the best option seemed that I wanted to study further. And I applied for 4 universities, not because I was confident about getting into any of them, but honestly because I procrastinated and I got very lazy. And I applied to 4 universities, and luckily they worked out, and I moved to Cambridge for my master's. But now coming to this whole idea and issue of, prepping for CLAT and how you balance it with boards and how do you kind of prioritize between the two, let's be honest, it is really, really hard to balance your prep for a competitive exam with your prep for boards, right? It is really hard. But I think what it boils down to is prioritizing which of the two means more to you. And I prioritized badly, or it didn't go as per plan in my first attempt. But I think you really do need to prioritize. And I don't mean to say that if you're giving a competitive exam you shouldn't pay attention to your schoolwork and to your boards. You absolutely should. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that this is a competitive exam where 40 to 60,000 people appear, right? And there are only so many seats. So if you're serious about CLAT, do start working very hard towards the end of your 11th grade and in your 12th grade. So please start working hard, make a curriculum for yourself, try to balance both, but you will have to, at the end of the day, prioritize one above the other, okay? And in my opinion, I would then prioritize my prep for a competitive exam over my schoolwork. And that's a hard decision to make, and that's a very hard thing to do. But I think this prioritization needs to come early on in the day when you're prepping for a competitive exam, especially if you're very serious about that trajectory and that path that you want to take in your career. Um, I think for me personally, maths was one of my biggest fears, especially when I was appearing for CLAT. I gave up maths after class 10. I didn't take it up in 11th and 12th. And honestly, for me, maths was this absolute nightmare. And I was so relieved when I got away from it in at the end of my ICSE in the 10th grade. And I didn't do very well in maths ever. And even though the maths section in the CLAT exam is something that really terrified me. But thankfully, I had some really good friends, especially when I was giving CLAT for the second time. The people that I lived with in my PG in Delhi were some of my closest friends, and some of them happened to be really, really good at maths. So they literally handheld me throughout the process, retaught everything to me. So if you're bad at maths, if you're scared of maths, then please start practicing. Get your basics right. Please start practicing. Give it time because it really needs time. And this maths section becomes one of the very important sections in the CLAT exam, because this is where a lot of people lose out on marks and a lot of people do really well. And this kind of, along with the GK section, this becomes the kind of determining grounds for your allotment of colleges, for your merit list, so on and so forth, right? So because in things like legal reasoning and in things like uh, logical reasoning, it becomes fairly, it's a little hard to come upon one right answer, and there is no objective one right answer. In things like GK and in maths, there is an objective correct answer, right? So these are places where you can really score a lot of marks if you know your subject well. And this becomes the place and the point where some students do really well and rise up in the merit list, and some others who might know their logical reasoning and their legal reasoning really well may still not do as well and fall lower down in the rank list and in the merit list, right? So if maths is something that you're scared of, just like I am, then please start working on it. Start addressing your basics. Get in touch with your teachers. I'm sure they're more than willing to help you out and explain the basic concepts to you. For me, my friends really, really helped. They literally taught me everything from the basics right till the kind of advanced maths that CLAT needs. But if you've done maths till 10th, you should be able to do it, or at least you will kind of be able to grasp the basics. And if you're doing it in 11th and 12th, then I'm sure you'll be fine with it. Then there's no cause for concern, right? um, I think for the CLAT exam in the year that I took it, we had negative marking. So it became a little dicey for us to then mark answers if we didn't know them 100% and if we weren't 100% sure of them. But I believe now the negative marking aspect has been removed from CLAT and from the CLAT exam once again. So if you are attempting CLAT, feel free to just mark. If you're not 100% sure of any answer, still go ahead and pick a correct, the answer that seems the best option to you at that point in time. Do mark that. Don't leave a question unattempted because you don't know if your answer or your guess may just work out, right? So since there is no longer a negative marking aspect to CLAT, at least that I know of, you could just go ahead and pick the option that seems the best to you. Um, I think for CLAT, what becomes really essential is time management, and that's where I went wrong in my first attempt as well. For me, my time management was really terrible, and when I get flustered, I kind of lose track of what I'm doing. I kind of become very, very nervous, and it becomes hard for me to focus on things. So keep a cool head, be calm, manage your time. A lot of a fixed amount of time to each section, and if you see that you're not being able to complete that section in that period that you've allotted, say if you allot 40 minutes for legal reasoning and you're not able to complete all of the legal reasoning questions in that 40 minutes, then move on to the next section. Don't continue to spend your time on that particular section. Move on to the next section, attempt those questions, and then come back. If you have time left, come back to the section which is incomplete. Okay. Now, I think there was a question initially that I received about whether one needs to study law in detail to appear for the CLAT paper. You need not study law in detail. The point is that you will study law in detail when you make it to the law school, right? But for the CLAT exam, there are certain components like torts, like contract law, and the legal reasoning section does have some questions on the basics of tort law and contract law. So if you're appearing for CLAT, I'm sure most of you who are considering appearing for the exam are going to take or are already taking some sort of coaching or the other, right? So in the kind of prep material that you receive from your coaching sections, or if you're a part of the Facebook groups or the different groups on social media, I remember the time when I was taking CLAT and appearing for the exam, there was something called CLAT which used to come up with these compendiums of GK and compendiums of questions of logical reasoning and legal reasoning. That was very helpful at the time that I was appearing for the paper. But of course, it's been a while now, so I don't know if these platforms are still around or if they've changed their nomenclature to something else. But there are a lot of groups on social media where CLAT aspirants discuss questions, solving methods, answers, time allocation, so on and so forth. Please read the newspaper. Please keep up with current affairs, because the CLAT GK section has some of the most obscure questions in the world. Like the year I appeared for the paper, I remember they asked us how many airports there are in India. And this is not something that one would casually know, right? So there are certain very, very obscure questions that come up in the CLAT GK section, solely so that it becomes this one point that some students get and some don't, and then it becomes easier to decide the merit list, right? And the marks that each student gets. So there are a lot of very obscure things that one can possibly not know in the CLAT GK section, and then it boils down to a matter of luck. But all you can do is cover your bases and try to read as much as you can about current affairs, about global affairs, about politics, things that are in the news. So please do follow newspapers. I personally love the Quint, the Wire, the Leaflet. So these are the news sites that I follow, the Caravan. So please do read up. I cannot emphasize enough on the importance of reading and on the importance of being aware of things that are happening around you. And I don't just mean politics. I don't just mean cricket. I mean literally everything, okay? Right down from which movie has come out, who stars in what movie, which is something that I am very good at. I have a lot of useless Bollywood knowledge and a lot of useless pop culture knowledge. But this is also something that becomes important in competitive exams, especially that have obscure GK sections like CLAT. So it helps to know things about music, it helps to know things about film, it helps to know which writer won what award. Nobel Prizes, again, are something that become very important in CLAT. So please do read up as much as you can. And this habit of reading is something that's going to stand you in very good stead, especially in law school. So please cultivate this habit of reading. And one thing that becomes, again, very important in law school is your writing. And I firmly believe that your writing will only improve if you read a lot. It is only when you read consistently everything and over a long period of time and you read a lot that your writing will start taking shape and will start getting better, right? Okay. Coming to what career paths are open to you if you follow this path of law, if you take CLAT, if you go to law school. Now there are a lot of options that open up for you, okay? So some of these options are, of course, litigating and practicing, being a practicing advocate, appearing in court. And there are two sides to this. Either you can be a criminal practitioner or you can be a civil commercial lawyer. Now, depending on your areas of interest, of course, that will take shape later on. And you can choose to practice law and become a litigating counsel, either civil, commercial, or criminal. You can also choose to work at a law firm, which can be a big corporate law firm. Like in India, the big ones are Khaitan, Amarchand Mangaldas, so Shardur Amarchand and Cyril Amarchand, now Tri-Legal. There are some law firms which are at the second level but still very, very good, like Pathak, like SNR. So there are a lot of really big law firms in India right now. There are a lot of big international law firms like Linklaters, Allen and Overy, Norton Rose. So there are several very big law firms both in India and in foreign countries that open up to you once you study law. Apart from that, you can also take up a role as an in-house counsel for different companies. So, for example, ITC, ICICI Bank, you can become in-house counsels for these different organizations. Star Network, I have a friend who is the in-house counsel for the Star Network channels, and he is particularly interested in sports law, so he handles sports law for Star Network. So he does a lot of these contracts that you have for IPL, negotiations between different TV channels and different sports people. So a lot of opportunities open up in corporate law firms and in-house counsels. And also you can, of course, litigate and be a civil lawyer or a criminal lawyer. Now, something else that opens up for you if you pursue law is this avenue of public policy, which is something that I'm interested in. So public policy is kind of shaping legislations, advising members of parliaments, networking with different parliamentarians to shape legislation and to shape the different statutes that govern different aspects of our lives in our country. So some of the big think tanks that work are Vidhi, Center for Law Policy, so CLPR, Center for Law and Policy Research. Then there is PRS, which particularly works on advising members of parliament, and they run something called the LAMP Fellowship. So for people who are interested, fresh graduates who are interested in public policy, the LAMP Fellowship becomes a very good pathway because they pair you up with a particular member of parliament, and then you spend a year working with that MP and advising them on the different bills that they are proposing and on their different tasks in the parliament. The research center that I work at is Schlett Center for Health Law, Ethics and Technology. And like I said, I particularly work at the intersection of law, gender, sex, and sexuality. I also work with a lot of law and marginalization. So I work on caste, I work on trans rights, I work on intersex people's rights, I work on disability rights. So this is what I do at the Center for Health Law, Ethics and Technology. And another avenue that opens up to you, which you can kind of combine with your interest in public policy, which is again something that I do, is academia and research, where you teach law and you research in different fields of law as per your area of interest. And then you also do advocacy and policy work on the side. Are there any questions? I'm happy to take any questions at any point if there is something, or if you would like me to go on and then take questions at the end, that is also okay.
Yes,
Padma,
ma'am, you can go. You can go on now. We can have the questions towards the end.
all right, sure.
Thank you.
Coming to legal education, of course, there are several NLUs that have now come up in the last couple of years, and all of these NLUs are under the common CLAT exam. NLU Delhi has a separate exam called AILET. So that is a separate exam from the CLAT exam. Jindal has a separate exam called LSAT that they do. That is a third exam. So there are a lot of different private universities that have different modes of admissions, right? And Jindal is one of them. But largely, CLAT and IELTS are the two big exams. And then for each private university that you may want to apply to, there are separate entrance tests and separate criteria that they may have. Now, coming to this whole aspect of studying law at the undergrad level abroad, I personally don't think it's a very wise idea, because then that kind of prevents you from practicing law in India. If you were to study and study law at the undergrad level in, say, UK, you would not be qualified to then practice law in India. And once you came back from your undergrad degree in the UK, you would have to then take these conversion courses to convert your UK undergrad law degree to an Indian law degree and kind of make up for the courses that are mandatory under the Indian Bar Council, and then qualify yourself again all over again to practice law in India. In America, there is no undergrad degree in law, so you have to study another degree, and law, or the JD, the Juris Doctor, is kind of a post-grad degree that you do after 3 years of college in America. So that becomes a post-grad degree in and of itself. So what I did is, after my undergrad degree in law, I went to study further and I did my LLM, or my master's in law. And the reason why I wanted to do my master's was because I wanted to experience a big foreign university. I wanted to experience what life would be like and their methods of teaching would be like. But I think also because I felt like I didn't know enough. I felt like I didn't understand enough. I didn't have in-depth knowledge after my undergrad degree. And I had very niche interests in aspects of public international law that Indian universities didn't provide further opportunity in. And my interests have always been, ever since my third year or end of second year in law school, my interests have been in public international law, and especially in humanitarian law and human rights law. So humanitarian law is basically the law of armed conflict. It's the law that governs warfare, and it's the law that governs use of force. So when you have a conflict between countries, or if you have an internal conflict in a country, these are the laws that apply to kind of govern that conflict situation. So laws on self-defense, on use of force, of what kind of weapons you can use, on how prisoners of war are to be treated, on how on whether other states can intervene in a war between two countries. This is what international humanitarian law governs and addresses. Human rights law is, as the name suggests, the law that regulates our most fundamental and essential rights and freedoms. So these are my areas of specialization. And when I went to Cambridge to pursue my master's, I was very clear about the fact that I wanted to pursue public international law and that I wanted to specialize in human rights and conflict. So the subjects that I took up in Cambridge then were international humanitarian law, human rights law, law, medicine, and life sciences, which answers questions of ethics, of bodily autonomy, of consent, aspects of reproductive rights, aspects of things like things like euthanasia, so organ trading, drug policy. So these are the things that law, medicine, and life sciences address. And I also took another subject called global governance, which addresses how different international organizations and governments coexist to regulate a particular space or a particular situation. So this was my area of interest and area of specialization. And I was very, very convinced about it. And after my master's at Cambridge, I stayed on. I got this opportunity to work with one of the research think tanks in Cambridge. And my professor in law, medicine, and life sciences, Dr. Little, gave me this opportunity to stay on as her research assistant and work in developing a course with her. So I stayed back for a period of 2 or so months, 2.5 months, working at the Center for Law, Medicine, and Life Sciences. And I helped her develop a course on regulatory drug policies and on patenting of medicines and so on and so forth. So that was a very, very invaluable experience for me to work at a big think tank within the Cambridge University and to have Dr. Little as my mentor. That really helped me kind of understand that academia could be a real option for me. But this academia is not something that I planned for myself, to be very honest. While I was at Cambridge, Jindal University happened to come to Cambridge to recruit, and they had a very informal sort of an event with most of us, the LLM students. And over a very informal conversation, they happened to offer some of us this position of research associate and lecturer in law. And I thought, if nothing else comes up, or if I don't find something that interests me more, I could consider this position.
Oishi, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you like to show the PowerPoint presentation now?
Yes, ma'am, please. That would be good.
Sure. Lucky, can we have the PowerPoint presentation, please? Yes. Can we go to the next slide, please, Lucky? Next, please. Yes, we
So
can
these
start
are
from
some of the pictures of Cambridge, and to be very honest, I never expected myself to get into Cambridge. It was completely this dream university for me. I never thought I'd make it there, but surprisingly enough, I did. And when I first got my acceptance from Cambridge, I thought someone was joking. I thought my friends had fabricated a letter. I was completely unconvinced about it. I made my friends check the veracity of this letter repeatedly. I made my brother check if this was from the correct person or the admissions office, and I was completely in disbelief. So Cambridge was this absolute dream come true for me. It's where my heart lies, and it's the place that I love the most right now in the world. And it's the most beautiful place that one could possibly live in. But that being said, if you can go through the pictures of Cambridge that are there on this PowerPoint presentation, ma'am, if
okay.
you'd like to
Next slide. Yes, ma'am.
next slide. So this is one of the libraries at Cambridge. This is the library of the Gonville and Keys College. Um, the picture that you saw before this was of St. John's College. We can go to the next slide, ma'am. This is King's College, which is the quintessential postcard for every picture that you see of Cambridge. So this is the King's College Chapel, and the little boats that you see are called punts, and this is something that is very unique to Oxbridge. And it's a very beloved activity for most tourists and for students on lazy summer days to go punting. Ma'am, you could go to the next slide, please. So again, these are just pictures of Cambridge. It's an absolutely idyllic, beautiful place to live in. But that being said, it is also a very high stress environment. It is an environment that is extremely demanding. It is an environment where everyone is constantly working around you. And for someone like me who has severe imposter syndrome, and someone like me who always thinks that, you know, they aren't good enough, they don't know enough, it was a very challenging environment at the same time. But I found some of my closest friends and confidants in Cambridge, and I was very, very fortunate to have that. But that being said, this is probably the most demanding situation and the most demanding academic environment that I have ever found myself in. And it is a place where you are constantly expected to be at the top of your game. You're constantly expected to do about 200 to 300 pages of reading every week. So you have to be prepared to work very, very hard if you're applying for a postgrad degree, and especially if you're hoping to go to one of the top universities in the world. Ma'am, can we have the next slide, please? All right, so this is Queen's College, which is another one of the colleges in Cambridge, and this bridge is called the Mathematical Bridge. And the story is that this bridge was put together by Newton, and when he first put this bridge together, he didn't use any nails, and it's just on the placement of these separate kind of slabs of wood, and that no nails were used in the making of this bridge. So several Cambridge students over the decades have tried to take this bridge apart to understand the physics and the maths behind how this bridge was made, and then they have been unsuccessful and they haven't been able to put the bridge back together, which is why the bridge in its current form has nails in it. But originally, when the bridge was made, it was kind of this marvel because no nails were used in the way the bridge was originally constructed. So this was my time at Cambridge. It was one of the most enriching experiences of my life. And I completely loved it. I completely loved every aspect of it. But at the same time, it was a very, very stressful environment that demanded absolutely the highest from everyone who was there. So after I returned from Cambridge, I was wondering what to do, and this Jindal opportunity was there. And I thought, why not give academia a shot? Why not give teaching a shot? Why not go to a place which gives me absolute freedom to read what I would like and write what I would like, and also teach on the side? And I'm still kind of experimenting with teaching. I do like it. And at the same time, I do feel restless at times, wondering if I'd like to be a practitioner. I miss being a part of spaces where matters are actually argued. And sometimes I feel a little restless about being an academic and not practicing. So that's a space that I'm still trying to navigate. But I think my area of interest in human rights and in humanitarian law has been shaped by a number of different experiences that I've had over time. I think one of them is my love for legal aid and my interaction with legal aid in university and right from the beginning of my time in university. But apart from that, I think there are several kind of frameworks of understanding that I have built over time. And one of them is this understanding that the personal is political, that everything that shapes your identity, that shapes how you think, that shapes who you are is political. And this is something that is a very fundamental belief for me. And this is what has really shaped my interest in human rights. By the personal is political, I mean that there are several different frameworks that kind of operate together to shape each of us. And there is this concept called intersectionality, which is what I work with. And this framework of intersectionality is the understanding that each individual, each one of us, have several different aspects of our identity. Okay, for example, our class, our caste, our gender, our sex, our sexuality, where we come from, what language we speak, what food we choose to eat, all of these different aspects shape our identity. And intersectionality is this concept which says that each of these aspects of our identity don't exist in isolation. They exist and interact with one another. And the way that these aspects of our identity interact with one another and work with one another kind of shapes the networks and the frameworks of privilege and opportunity or oppression that we may have. So to give you an example, me as an upper class, I'm not aware of my caste. I've been that privileged that caste has never really played a real role in my life. But me as an upper caste, heteronormative, cisgendered woman who's had access to the best of education, who is able-bodied, has had different privileges than someone who is poor, lower caste, not able-bodied or disabled will have, right? So intersectionality is this understanding that the different aspects of your identity operate together to inform the kind of opportunities that you will have access to, the kind of resources that you will have access to, and the kind of privileges that you will have access to. And it is this kind of understanding that shaped my belief in the fact that the personal is political, that when the state tries to regulate different aspects of the life of the individual, whether it be our sexual preferences, whether it be our choice to have children or not have children, whether it be the kind of food we eat, whether it be the kind of language we speak, all aspects of the personal are political. And this is the kind of understanding that really shaped my love for human rights, because I kind of believe that the state has little to no role to play in intervening in the life of an individual and in the decisions that an individual makes. And this kind of understanding of social location and intersectionality made me think of the gap between the law as it exists in text and the law as it is practiced. So there is a severe gap that we see between legal theory and practice. And what we do as human rights lawyers or as activists is to attempt to bridge the gap between legal theory and practice, especially in the field of public international law. And if you go on to study public international law anytime in the future, you will see that public international law actually doesn't have any coercive force behind it. There is nothing that binds a country to implement public international law. It is completely a voluntary mechanism. Hence, like this vast gap between legal theory and practice exists. One thing is said in the text of the law, but in the implementation of the law, a wholly different thing may happen. Okay, let me give you an example of this. This is something that I work very closely with. So for instance, most of us have seen hijras somewhere, right? In our city, we have had some interaction with them. Some of us may be afraid of them. Some of us wonder why they harass us. Some of us wonder why they are like this. But I used to be very afraid of hijras when I was a child, when I was growing up, because they were completely separate from my social reality and from my framework of understanding, right? They were so far removed from my life. But once I started working in legal aid, I actually did a number of sessions of legal aid and awareness with sex workers, with transgender people and with gender non-binary people. And once I started working with them and interacting with them, I kind of started understanding why they work in the way they do. So what I want to tell you guys today is that when you study law, what you need to really focus on is critical thinking. Anyone can open up a statute book and see what the law is. But when you study law, I want you to keep in mind that you need to inquire into the hows and the why. Why is a law the way it is? And how does this law operate differently for other people than it operates for you? Okay. So how does the law operate to disadvantage a different community than it operates for you, and why it does so? That is the question that I am most interested in, the hows and the whys. And that is why critical thinking becomes so important, especially when you're studying law. So let me give you an example of something called the Transgender Persons Protection of Rights Act, which came out in December 2019. And the rules under the Trans Persons Protection of Rights Act has been notified 2 weeks ago, and we are working, the center that I work with, SHLET, that I told you guys about, we are holding a number of community consultations to put forward the views of the trans community on this act and the rules under it that kind of inform their lives and shape their lives and their rights. Okay, so for most of us here, we will agree that trans people are like all of us. They are citizens of India just like all of us are. Then why is it that their lives face more repression and more oppression than our lives do? What is it about them that is so different that disenfranchises them from the very basic human rights and fundamental rights that all of us can enjoy, right? So, for instance, under the IPC, the Indian Penal Code, which is the criminal law in our country, for an offense of rape or sexual violence, something like 7 years of imprisonment is given. But the Trans Act says that for violence against a trans person, there is only imprisonment of 3 years. Why is that so? Why is that if a woman like you and I are assaulted, there is imprisonment for 7 years, but if a trans woman is assaulted, then the imprisonment is far less, the punishment is far less. What is the rationale behind this? Do these people have lesser rights than we do? Are they lesser citizens than we are? Why does the government think that they don't demand or they don't need the same kind of protection and the same rights that we do? So the Trans Act also says something like, for a person to identify as a trans person, they have to get a certificate from a magistrate saying that they are indeed a trans person. When you and I have woman or female marked on our ID cards, do we need a certificate from any magistrate or anyone else to say that this person is truly a woman? We don't, right? So then why does a trans person need a certificate from a magistrate? Another thing that the Trans Act does is that it says that for someone who identifies differently than their biological sex, so for someone who is born male but identifies as female, for them to have an identity card or a document saying that they are trans woman, they will have to undergo a sex reassignment surgery. Do you think this is valid? Do you think that the state should say you should have a surgery that should change your biology and your body in order for you to identify as one or the other gender? It shouldn't, right? So this is something that concerns your basic fundamental human rights. And this is where I work. This is the issue that I work on. I also work on abortion rights, where I am currently working with several parliamentarians in leading advocacy with the research center that I work at. There's something called the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, and it says that for women to have abortions above a certain period of the pregnancy, they need a medical board that consists of 5 specialist doctors to say that the fetus has certain abnormalities. Now, there are several different problems with this understanding. Number one is the rationale that only a fetus that is quote unquote abnormal is unwanted. That a fetus that is normal would not be quote unquote again normal is wanted, and it is only an abnormal child or an abnormal fetus that is unwanted. Now, this thinking is very problematic, and the disability rights movement has several contentions on this point. But what I am mostly concerned with is the practicality of having a medical board that has 5 different specialist doctors in rural India, where the medical infrastructure is so poor that there are barely any Anganwadi workers, barely any physicians, barely any gynecologists available. if in rural Bengal, we ask that there be a medical board of 5 specialist doctors to sign off on abortions above a particular period or timeline in the pregnancy, then this forces women or this forces pregnant people to turn towards unsafe means of abortion, right? And this then jeopardizes the life of the pregnant person even further. So I work on something called telemedicine, which says that you should make these services available online, especially during the pandemic and during these situations where access to healthcare is so few and far in between. I'm also working on advocacy with different MPs to say that the amendment or the changes that are being implemented to this Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act are completely incorrect and badly thought out. We haven't considered how this will differently affect people in rural areas. Just because for us in urban areas we have access to these specialist doctors doesn't mean that people in rural India, where most of our population lives, has the same kind of access, right? So I want you guys to think of the whys in the hows. Why does the law operate differently for certain sections of society, and how does it operate differently than it does for you who are the privileged lot, like for us who are privileged? So this is kind of the understanding that I have of the law, which has shaped my area of interest and my understanding of human rights. And that is why I do the kind of work that I do. I'm interested in the kind of research that I am in. But over the last couple of months, especially, I have kind of understood the need to take a step back and to listen. And this is another thing that the law teaches you, and the study of the law teaches you. And especially when I work in marginalization on caste, I have come to realize that I don't know enough, and that it is not even my place to comment on caste because I have never experienced it. The bubble that I have lived in has been so intense, and my privilege has been so deep that caste has never played a role in my life. And I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm extremely privileged to see that caste has never had a feature in my life in the way that my life has ordered itself. But this is not true for the vast majority of our country, right? As you guys will have known of the Hathras rape case that happened a few days ago. When I teach legal methods, in my class a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about the Hathras rape case, and one of my students said, "Why do we need to say that this was a Dalit girl? It was just a girl. Why does caste become important?" And this is something that is so seminal right now. Why is caste important? Caste is important because it doesn't affect our lives, but it affects the lives of millions of people in India. And just because it is not our social reality, it doesn't mean that it's not the social reality for most of our population, right? So we have to listen. Those of us who don't experience caste, and that is a great thing for our lives where caste is not a feature, it doesn't affect the access that we have to opportunities, to resources, to privileges. That's great, and we are all extremely fortunate for that. But for us, we have to take a step back, we have to pass on the mic, and we have to listen. We have to listen and learn about how caste or class or poverty or hunger or the lack of education, the lack of shelter affects the lives of other people. Just because it doesn't affect our life doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? So over the last couple of years and months, I have especially understood the need to take a step back, the need to unlearn, the need to pass on the mic, and the need to listen. And I have kind of realized that I encounter my biggest doubts when I say I know. I really don't know. I really do not know. And I think saying I know in whatever context, when I say that I know in a particular context, I kind of stop myself and I rethink and I take a step back and I ask myself, do I really? Do I really know? Do I really know what caste feels like? What caste oppression feels like? Do I really know what it feels like to be denied access to education and access to basic healthcare? Do I know what it really feels like to be denied access to an opportunity because I can't afford it? I don't know. And that is where it becomes really important for us to stop, for us to ask other people whose lived realities these are, to pass on the mic, to give them an opportunity to speak, and to ask ourselves if we know. And that's when I try to tell myself that I don't know, but I think I understand. And I think that that kind of shapes the way I approach the law. by listening to the experiences of other people, their lives, their realities, where this aspect of caste or gender or sex is more prominent than it is for my life. I try to listen to their experiences and I try to tell myself that I don't know, but I'm willing to understand. I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to understand. Because for me, the point of saying I know, it feels like the conversation has stopped. It feels like that's the moment where it is static, where it becomes confined, and that is the end of inquiry and that is the end of learning. Okay. So I try to tell myself that I don't know, because I really do not. I don't know much about anything at all. But what I'm willing to do is I'm willing to try and learn and I'm willing to understand. And that is the way I approach the law. And that is the way that I interact with the law. And I hope that for all of you who study the law or who go towards studying the law in future, you bring in this aspect of critical thinking. You question why the law is the way it is, how it operates differently for people than it operates for you. And I hope that you address the law as a dynamic living thing that evolves with the changing needs of the society. And I hope whenever you say you know, you stop yourself, you ask yourself if you really know, and you ask yourself if you're rather willing to understand than think that you know everything. Okay, so with that, I think I'll stop here. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to address them.
Thank you so much, Oishi. I think some of them have quite a lot of questions to ask you. So, yes,
Ma'am, I have a question.
yes, Anushka.
So, what inspires you to stand up for human rights?
Like I said, for me, when I first entered law school in first year, I was this naive 18-year-old, like most of you will be. And I had this whole grand idea of how I would change the world and how I would change society and how I would do things differently and how I would raise the marginalized up and I would give them their rights. And once I started working in legal aid, I started talking to a lot of people. I spoke with a lot of different kinds of people. I spoke with a lot of sex workers, with transgender people, with a lot of activists. And I kind of became a part of this very vibrant network of activists and advocates. And I came to understand that I suffer from a tremendous savior complex. When I say that I will be the one who is the change maker, that is completely wrong. That is erroneous. It's not like these people who I'm trying to uplift and help don't have the skills. They do. What they don't have is the opportunity. What they don't have are the resources. And that's where the difference between me and them arises. So my duty is to share my opportunity and is to share my resource, not to think that I know more than them and that I'm capable of doing more than them. Because I really am not. They are far more experienced about their lived realities than I am. So what my tool is, what my role is to be a good ally, is not to be the face of the movement. Because I'm not. I haven't experienced these things, right? But what I can be is I can be a good ally. I can say that, hey, if you have a disadvantage when it comes to understanding and speaking English, let me write it out for you. Let me draft your petitions for you. If it's something about the Trans Act and I'm not a part of the trans community, let me consult with members of the trans community about what it is in the Trans Act that actually causes them barriers in their lives or that actually disadvantages them. So all I can do is I can be a good ally. I can consult, I can converse, I can bring these people who live on the fringes into the mainstream and bring their views in onto the fore and present them to the concerned authorities, because I have the kind of access that they lack, right? So my duty then becomes to share my resource, to share my opportunity, and to bring these people from the margins into the mainstream, rather than to think that I know better and I can say what they need in their lives, because I can't, right? So I think that's what shapes the kind of approach that I take to human rights, where my role is to be an ally rather than to be the leader of the movement.
Okay, thank you. Yes, anybody else?
Yes, ma'am. I have a question that what inspired you to take up law as your career?
To be very honest, I wasn't very inspired when I took up law as a career. Apart from the fact that I I always believed in all aspects of the personal being political. I was always troubled about too many things happening in the world. Until date, I'm very troubled about very many things happening in the world. Whether it's a war in the Middle East or whether it's caste oppression or India, all of these things like actively weigh me down every day. And this is something called compassion fatigue that you guys will learn about later on, where there are so many things wrong with the world that they really start affecting you to the level where you feel burdened and you feel incapacitated to really do much about it, right? And this is something called compassion fatigue, and I try to not let that get to me. But when I started, or when I went to law school, I wasn't very inspired. It was because I was bored with history and everyone else in my family was a lawyer that I went into law school. And that just seemed like the best option at that point in time. But I think the inspiration really struck once I went into law school and once I started working in legal aid and once I took this course in my third year called Decolonization of International Relations. And that really gave me all of these frameworks of understanding that I today use to inform my perspectives on law, on justice, on morality, on society. So it was one professor, one course, and a very opportune moment that kind of shaped my approach to the study of law.
Okay. Thank you.
I have another question.
Okay, students, when you're asking the questions, please introduce yourselves as well.
I'm Shomadika Moulik. I'm from I study in class 11.
Right?
And do you think legal studies should have been incorporated in the CBSE syllabus before senior secondary section, maybe in the 9th grade, or do you think it has been introduced to us at the right moment, like in class 11?
I actually don't know much about the CBSE system, to be very honest, because I only ever was exposed to ICSC, ISC, where legal studies wasn't an option for us. But I think it's great that you guys have this kind of opportunity that you do to study about the law, to learn about the law, and to really make an informed decision about whether this is something that you're at all interested in and you at all want to pursue further. So I think class 11 is a good time. I think 9 perhaps would have been a little too young. But I think
Yes, it would have been a bit earlier.
you know a lot more, you're more aware of the world around you, and you have certain opinions by that time. So I think 11th grade is a good idea, a good time to introduce the study of law.
Okay, Oshi, I think we can take the last question for today. Can we take one more question, Oshi?
Yes, sure, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay.
Ma'am, I'm Adrija Jana of class 11. And ma'am, my question to you is, apart from having legal aptitude and a good academic record, what else is necessary for a student who aspires to study law in a foreign country?
I think you have to show purpose, like because there are so many people who apply every year, and to apply to the top universities, everyone will more or less have the same kind of grades, right? That's a base requirement. But I think what can set you apart is to show purpose in your statements, in your essays, in your writing, to show why you want to study what you want to study, how you choose to engage with it, why you want to study at that particular university, what that brings to your life, and how this will further inform your career choices. So I think you have to demonstrate purpose in your applications to a foreign university, especially a top university. And I think that's what sets apart one candidate from another, the way you put forward your purpose.
Okay, now I think all your questions have been answered, students. So we would like to end for the day, and I would like to call upon Miss A.N. Basu to say a few words, and then Gargi Datta could give us the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Oishi, for sharing your experiences and expertise with our students today. It was a very enriching session. I'm certain that this interaction will surely benefit our students to prepare themselves for the CLAT examination and also inspire them to pursue a career in the legal field. And the main takeaway I feel from the today's session is it will help them to reflect and think critically. That was the main thing, the main essence of this today's session was. Thank you once again, Oishi. I think students, I hope all of you have benefited a lot from this session today. And I myself, I really enjoyed sitting here listening to you. You are an excellent speaker.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I loved interacting with all of you. And I really wish you the best of luck. And do feel free to get in touch with me if there are any questions that I can answer. Fatma ma'am has my details, and ma'am, I'm happy to.
Sure, Rishi, sure. Yes,
Thank
Gargi Datta, can we please have the vote of thanks?
Sure, ma'am. Good evening to all. We are indeed extremely privileged and honored to have with us Ms. Oishi Shaha for this incredible job shadowing session. Ma'am, your dynamism and determination is truly inspiring to all of us who want to take up law as a career profession in the future. On behalf of the MBWA family, I take this opportunity to convey our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to you for taking time out of your busy schedule and conducting this webinar, which was truly amazing. And I am sure all of us will cherish this enriching experience in the years to come. Thank you once more for enlightening us and showing us the path to our dream profession.
Thank you so much once again for having me, and I truly enjoyed interacting with all of you. Have a good evening and a good weekend ahead. Thank you.